Hey Oscar, you reached out to me because you have prepared the website startups.rip, where you kind of have a force motion on all failed or acquired or acqui-hired Y Combinator companies. I think it's a super interesting idea. I had a look at the fintech list. There's a couple of them there. Obviously, if you've been around in tech or fintech, you see a lot of very promising ideas that just come and they go. So I'm super interested to dive deep into what makes a failed startup and what lessons we can learn from that. But before we do that, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit what your story is?
Definitely. Hey, Boaz. Thanks for having me on. I'm super excited to talk to you today. So yeah, startups.rip started as a hackathon project, kind of a passion project, actually. And it was a hackathon hosted at Y Combinator,
Hmm.
hence why, the focus on Y Combinator. And they also have a very good data set of standardized schema for how they represent startups. And in terms of like why this idea in the first place, I would say the two big passions in my life are history and technology. So in college, I actually double majored in computer science and history. So it was always very natural to me to think of startup failures and successes through the lens of history. Why did this idea not work in the past? What has changed since then? The famous VC question is always why now, right? Because if you're working on something, the chances are good that you're not the first person to have thought of it. People have tried the idea probably in the past and, maybe it didn't work out. That shouldn't dissuade you from trying that same idea or similar idea again, but you should have a very good answer to the question, why now? That's the classic thing like VCs always ask,
Hmm.
right? And yeah, and I think this project had very humble beginnings. It started out as just like an Apple Notes document I had of postmortems. So I think in the startup genre, this is like, one type of blog post that a founder will write when they sunset their company, when they shut things down,
Hmm.
is they will write a Medium post, or I guess these days it would be a Substack, of what are all the things I learned from doing this startup, what do we try, what didn't work, and just kind of summarizing all of their learnings. And I really enjoyed this type of writing, not only because I look up to the founders. I one day want to be a founder myself, but also I feel like there's just a lot of hard-earned wisdom in there. This person probably spent 7 years of their lives cranking away at this problem. They probably know a lot that would be useful for you to know. And I think it's a great service, and it's a great part of Silicon Valley culture that the default is always, hey, how can I pass down my learnings to other entrepreneurs who are going to try a similar thing in the future? So I've been
Hmm.
collecting these postmortems, retrospectives for a while. But what I realized was that these only really exist for a very small percentage of startups. And I wanted to see postmortems and kind of a history of all YC startups. And, when the AI models got good enough at doing deep research in particular and at writing things that don't immediately scream AI slop, that's when I felt like the timing was right to do this like holistic project of looking at all the YC startups and reasons why they failed, and giving people an excuse to actually look at history and use that to inform what they might do in the future.
So what does the process look like for collecting these stories? Like, you must have like a list from Y Combinator, from their internal, what's it called, Bookface, that just has, or actually public documentation also as well on every single round that, or cohort that they've had. You kind of check what the company's doing now and release a Claude Code agent to like do deep research and check what the company has done and what the postmortem might be, and then publish that. Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, I would say, well, so one thing is, since I'm not a YC founder or a YC alum, I don't
You don't
actually
have
have
access
access
to
to
it,
Bookface.
of course.
That would actually would be a good idea. We should get someone on the team who does have access to that. But we just have access to the public facing YC company directory,
Hmm.
which gives you, basic metadata about the company, what their website is, who their founders are, where their HQ is based, and a short description of the company. And you're exactly right. We turned that into a deep research report. So I don't know when like ChatGPT first came out with deep research, but I remember like when that came out, was that like early 2025 or maybe late 2024? It was like a really mind-blowing moment because it was like, okay, instead of just generating, this small passage that you're used to ChatGPT generating, now you have this, very detailed report that's actually way more useful for all types of knowledge work, right? And so since then, Claude has copied them. I think Gemini has their own version of deep research. Basically, any AI chatbot, deep research is like a table stakes product. So we essentially built our own version of deep research. I would say it's quite a bit better than what you get out of the box with these AI chatbots, because
Hmm.
we've built into the system like kind of the types of sources the agent should prioritize, right?
Hmm.
So this could be very commonly like news articles, like press release, but also we tell it, hey, look through all of like Substack, all of Twitter, all of Medium to see if the founder has actually written a postmortem. So it actually works the best for um, startups where the founder is either like building in public or wrote some commentary like when they wrapped up their company. So because those where we get the best like primary sources. But yeah, I think at a high level, it is just a deep research agent with some tweaks, knowing the use case we were going to use it for.
Cool. And I think that, I mean, the interesting thing is, right, like you've been around in startups for a while. I think you also start seeing this divergence between what the public story is. Founder says, we, this didn't work out for this, that, and this, and then like maybe like the less public version, all of the drama, all of the co-founder conflicts, all of the, you know deals that fall through, et cetera, et cetera. To what extent do you think you can actually surface that, or if it's, I guess it's tough. Like, do you have any outreach? Do you email former employees and ask them, like, does this look right? Or maybe that will
Yeah,
come in a future iteration.
yeah. That's a great point. So I always say when you look at a startup, there's like the TechCrunch version of the startup story, and there's the actual reality. And totally to your point, those two sometimes are overlapping, but a lot of the times are couldn't be further from each other. So yeah, we want to get as close to like the truth version of the story as possible. Now that's hard when most of your sources are publicly available content. The thing with the deep research agent is that it's been prompted to look at things that maybe don't get ranked very high on SEO, but just might be some offhand tweet that someone made, or someone posted. So we have tweets in there that have less than 10 likes, but are actually like very meaningful, adds a lot of color to the story of that startup. And then to your point about um, reaching out to founders or actually people who are firsthand involved in these companies, so that can be employees, founders, investors. The co-founder of Wikipedia has this law called Cunningham's law, and he says if you want the answer to some question online, don't ask for the answer, don't ask a question, just put the wrong answer out there, and you can bet that someone will come out and correct you. And so we've seen a version of this play out with some of our reports where we generated it, put it out there. As you saw probably a couple weeks ago, it went viral on X.
Yeah.
And I would say 10% of my DM inbox are people who are involved with these companies saying like what we got wrong. And we're always very fast to address that feedback. So we have a mechanism for quickly revising the reports based on verified corrections.
I wonder, like, what sort of mistakes were you making? Like, if you're running deep research at scale, like I use deep research tools quite a lot to, research guests and people, and like, often, most of the time they work quite well, but sometimes it's just like, just guess the wrong person and starts reporting on like the completely, just goes way off kilter. So what sort of
Mm.
mistakes, I'm curious, did you guys find it was producing when you were doing this at this scale?
Yeah, I would say it's been less. The failure mode has been less like straight up hallucination and more just like stale data. So maybe they raised a Series B, but we only got up to Series A for some reason, right? And the founders will let us know, hey, we actually raised 20 million, not 15, as
Yeah.
you put in the report. So it's more things like that. And I mean, the base model we use is Sonnet 4.6. And I would say just like at that model layer, the hallucination, the AI labs are always like improving this over time. And we do have,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not
I mean,
just one deep
not so
research
much like
agent. Yeah.
hallucination, just more like, common first name, last name, just there's just gets the wrong person, like,
Yeah,
or,
I mean, it's hard to catch all of that. We do say like, hey, this is, as with anything AI generated, it's like trust but verify. Like,
yeah,
don't put this in your master's thesis,
yeah,
right, or
yeah,
PhD thesis unverified. Like, just still check over everything. Yeah, I would say it's as good as like probably the state of the art deep research agents or better because of how we've tuned it, and also the system of AI agents we've set up is not just one agent. There's like a verifier agent that tries to play devil's advocate, that tries to poke holes and verify claims. And so when you have a system where the different agents have different objectives, right? One is like generating, one is editing, one is verifying. It does tend to work quite a bit better. I think it kind of gets. I'm not an expert on this stuff, but I think the reason why these AI labs, they recommend spawning like sub agents, even when you're doing Claude Code, for example, is because each agent can manage its own context better. And when the context window is not overloaded with information, tends to produce better answers, better results.
Yeah, actually very similar to the flow I use. I have a sub agent that, run as fact checkers, and sub agents that run as editors and sub agents that run as investigators, to
Yeah,
just try to coordinate all of it and put it all together. And that way, just, I think that's actually one of the things that AI has given us, that is kind of underreported. Like, just the amount of research that they can do, that before just took forever, and now you just press a button and off it goes. That's a
yeah,
huge, huge opportunity.
for sure. And then one thing we're playing around with is like finding the point of diminishing returns on like how long
Hmm.
you run an agent for.
Hmm.
So I think typically when you do deep research tasks, it's like anywhere between 10 to 15 minutes. So that's what, OpenAI and Claude have determined to be the sweet spot for how hard to look for information before you start summarizing and synthesizing. And so our agents also run for about, 15 to 20 minutes, I would say, per report. But we are looking at, dialing that up and seeing if we get noticeably better results and finding like the right trade-off between like cost and also quality.
Yeah, yeah. What are some of the key themes that you have seen in terms of what leads to startup failure, right? Because I feel like there's a lot of writing and vibe advice that is given on these things. But based on the systematic research that you guys have done, what has yielded? What are the main systematic reasons for failure here?
I think the one we really wanted to highlight with this project is the failure mode of being too early is the same as being wrong.
Yeah.
And yeah, we found so many examples of that. It's crazy. Like people were working on, coding agents in like 2021, right? People were doing like voice cloning and like the equivalent of 11 labs in Cartesia in like 2017, 2018. And they were all brilliant people. And I think as founders, like we have this, by their nature, they want to be visionaries, right? They see like a version of the future. And that's why they're doing the startup, is because they want to realize that vision. But that can be, that visionary nature of entrepreneurship can be a double-edged sword, because sometimes you can see too far into the future and be too optimistic, to the point where you only raise enough funding to last 3-4 years, and the vision you have in mind is maybe 10 years out.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some of these, obviously, like 11 Labs now exists, coding agents now exist. What are some of the things that you see there that just, you know, don't exist yet, or that could exist? Or maybe things
Mm,
that could have worked, they didn't work as a venture-backed, venture scale business because of, cost of technology, developers, et cetera, 5 to 10 years ago. But now, in a world where you can release 15 coding agents to build stuff, might potentially work. Is there anything you've seen like that?
yeah, totally. I think that was also part of the thesis for starting startups.rip, is that many of the ideas that were tried, it wasn't like there was no market demand for it, or they made any strategic blunders. It was
Mm.
simply that the market size was so constrained that it wasn't designed to be a venture scale problem, or it didn't have all the attributes of a venture scale problem, right? Just in terms of the
Hmm.
total addressable market being too small. But now, yeah, you and I with our Claude codes and with our codex can totally do something meaningful that, like, bootstrap business kind of has like a negative connotation to it in Silicon Valley. Like people think of it as less ambitious, but actually I would love to have a bootstrap business, right? Where I don't have to deal with investors and I can kind of own my own destiny in a way. And actually, yeah, a lot of these companies, they failed because of like investor pressure, right? The founder wanted to do something, but once you raised venture capital, you're not the only voice that matters, and you're actually beholden to your investors. So yeah, there are quite a few examples like this. I mean, a lot of the ones I can think of are just like vertical CRMs.
Hmm.
right? Imagine like a CRM for real estate agents. Probably in itself, not a big enough vision to be venture backed. Like, can you imagine being like a $10 billion outcome?
Yeah.
Maybe not, but definitely it can be something that's like prints multiple millions of dollars for yourself or a small team of developers. So yeah, I think another why now for our project is just the trend of AI dramatically reducing the cost of software development.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I shipped this week like 3 or 4 different websites and apps,
Yeah.
and I'm completely like, I come from a data and analytics background. I know how to write some code. I had shipped some like static websites before this, but I'm not a developer, and it is such a huge unlock to be able to build stuff and visualize stuff that up until now was pretty tricky to do. Uh, so yeah, that's definitely the case. Tell me more about like this project, right? So this project, it's an interesting project. It was part of a hackathon. You guys building this for fun? What are you guys working on, or do you think you're gonna take this further somehow? What's the idea here?
Yeah, we definitely want to take it further. I mean, I think it will stay a passion project, but a passion project with a business model that kind of sustains its own growth. Because a lot of as with any AI powered services, it actually costs quite a bit in token costs to run. So we have to, continually generate deep research reports. And so we
But
want to.
why do you have to continually generate it? Like, wasn't this like you do it once and then it just ran out the whole thing, or are you like doing new ones all the time?
Yeah, so right now we're not kind of going back and generating reports that we've already done. Although,
Hmm.
as you can imagine, like if we make the, underlying infrastructure better, the research results better, like we would definitely do that to improve what we already have. But yeah, there are like over 5,000 YC companies. I don't know if people realize this because when people think of YC, they think, oh, that's like maybe a couple hundred companies a year. But actually, they've been
Yeah.
around for like 20 years, right?
Yeah.
And they've dramatically grown the batch sizes. So there's like 5,000 plus YC companies. And so we don't, it's not like we ran deep research on all of them like in one go. What we do is like a just in time generation. So when a user wants a new report, that's when we generate it, like at the point that they want it, rather than like just in case.
Got it. So if I click
Yeah.
around on the website for a particular startup, then it will generate it potentially.
Yeah, so all the ones you see on the homepage. So I give you pro access, right? So you have
Yeah,
you
yeah,
have that. So all the ones you see on the homepage, those are requested by another user, and because they requested it, it's already done.
so I could request
But
one
there's a search
basically.
bar. So if there's a YC company you have in mind that you want to know more about, you can see it's like, oh, this company hasn't been analyzed yet. Leave your email. Or I think if you're logged in, you don't have to leave your email, and you can request a new report. And that's when we kick off the deep research job. Yeah, we didn't have any like funding to start this, so we had about I think $1,000 in Claude API credits, and we burned through all of that very quickly. And so we were like, well, we don't want to just lose money with this project. So since then we've rolled out some monetization, and definitely the power users have been really loving the pro plan that we rolled out.
Cool.
And to your earlier question about like how far can this go, the way I think about it is the last wave of these AI tools are all app builders that solve the problem of just so think like Lovable, Replit, V0. They solve the problem of, hey, I have a idea for an app, but I don't know how to build it.
Hmm.
And that was an amazing value proposition. And that helped them grow to hundreds of millions of users.
Hmm.
And I think as the costs of code just drops, ever closer to zero, we will live in a world where it's like idea bounded, idea constrained, where the problem is no longer I have an idea, I don't know how to build it, but rather, hey, I know I have all the tools and the ability to build anything I want, right? I'm very confident in my abilities, but what should I build? I think that's going to be the next big problem people look for solutions to. And so, yeah, I think the bottleneck now is no longer like execution, implementation, coding.
Hmm.
It's more validating an idea that you want to work on. And then it's also distribution, right? Like think about how many calorie tracking apps there are, but
Yeah.
all of them, they're not fighting the software war. They're fighting the TikTok and Instagram war.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
think we can provide something that like is going to be part of the solution for the next wave of builders, native builders.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's been my thesis for a while. Like, I think with people like me being able to release something onto the App Store, what you're gonna get is you're just gonna get a flood of software coming to market. As a you know, as the cost of producing software goes to zero, so will the price of how much you can actually extract for software per se. And then you end up with this world of, basically attention is the whole thing, is the only thing that's left, right? Your ability to distribute your software product, which basically means that, many of these ideas that you guys are going through will just become valid, potentially successful startups. Yeah. So yes, with with this, is there because I saw from your LinkedIn, you're also from a fintech background.
Yes.
Did you see anything interesting in the fintech space in terms of what was there, what was missing? I'm looking now at, the list of finance and fintech companies, and you guys have, it's not that many compared to how many YC has funded. There's thousands of companies YC has funded. I didn't realize they funded so many fintech companies. I'm actually looking for one now. Maybe I can submit. Have you seen any
Yeah,
trends on the fintech side?
for sure. And just before this, I put together something. Can I send you
Cool.
a link in the chat?
Sure, sure.
Okay, so check this out. I wouldn't like directly, snippet this and put in your article. Definitely verify everything here. But this is just what I gave Claude the entire database of YC companies and, our database of completed analyses and told it to look for some patterns and trends. And this is what it came up with. And so it identified 812 fintech startups. And that's actually a pretty high percentage. As I said, I think
Hmm.
there's about 5,000 total YC companies.
Yeah.
And I believe it looks at kind of when they applied or which batch they were in. And as you can see, the peak is definitely like 2022,
Mm.
and where there were 165 fintech companies. So it's actually a cool graph to see like when fintech was the hottest. And this was around the time that I was at Plaid. So I was at Plaid for about 3.5 years.
Mm.
And I calculated before I left, like I probably saw over 1,000 fintech companies, either, emailed with them, met the founder like in person or over Zoom, and just like dealt with them. So I was on the growth team where my job was to figure out, we have, these top 10 customers of like Coinbase, PayPal, Robinhood, Cash App, right? These are like the known successes. And my job was to figure out, okay, of these YC companies and two kids in a garage, which ones have the highest potential to be the next breakout company? Because
Yeah.
Plaid was an API company, so the revenue model was entirely usage based. So the more that they used us, the more revenue we made from that customer. So it was really important not just to serve like the currently biggest spenders on Plaid, but also to identify who are like the future breakouts going to be. And yeah, I built a bunch of internal dashboards and internal like heuristics for figuring this out. But there's really nothing like just talking to the founder and just getting a really good sense of like, okay, this guy's serious or this girl's serious, right? And then they know what they're doing, and they're they're not effing around. And so yeah, ultimately it's like that face-to-face interaction was super important. But I also realized I think I didn't connect the dots when I was first conceiving of this project. But now looking back, so many of the companies we worked with, they were unknowingly working on an idea that someone else had already tried before. But
Hmm.
because in Silicon Valley, it's cool to look into the future and say what you think will happen in the future, but kind of not cool to like look at the past because that's seen as like old news, right? Like most of these people that are working on new companies, they're in their 20s, early 30s.
Yeah.
So they have a total disregard for like Silicon Valley history or startup history. And what I noticed was like, hey, if they just knew a little bit more about their predecessors, let's say, or just founders who have attempted similar things in the past, that might have saved them a lot of headache. They might not have run into as many walls as they did. And so, yeah, after doing this project, I kind of connected that with my experience back at Plaid, thinking that, hey, these founders could have saved themselves a lot of trouble if they just looked at kind of the history of their space a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly, like, I go back and forwards on this, right? Like, on one hand, knowledge of history is useful because it helps you to stop bumping into the same problems that everyone else has gone into. On the other hand, um, I don't know. Sometimes you just need to roll the dice and maybe you'll get lucky. Like I was
Yeah,
working. We had a working prototype in 2020 of a prediction market, or maybe 2021. I was one of the first people trading on Polymarket. I looked at it in depth back then, and I got to the conclusion that, prediction markets aren't really going to be a thing because most people are going to want to gamble on sports only, and that's, regulatorily iffy. So, Augur was there before, that didn't really work out. All the bookies were probably going to lobby against it. It's not going to work. And in the end, the two things I missed was, the regulatory environment. They managed to carve something out for themselves. Two, the prediction markets would function as a media platform because the number itself, the price itself becomes a product that they can sell. So, just because something hasn't really worked in the past doesn't necessarily mean that you can't roll the dice and make it work in the future.
for sure. Yeah, there's definitely, I mean, in venture capital, so I also worked briefly in venture capital. And one thing you notice is that usually if a VC comes from an operating background or like they were a former founder themselves, they will avoid backing things that are like what they did before. And I asked them, well, why do you do this? Like, hey, you know the music space really well. Why don't you back more music companies? Like you did this 10 years ago, like just do it again. Because, you have all this domain expertise. And they tell me, oh yeah, it's because I know where all the bodies are buried. I kind of know too much. It's like
Yeah.
scaring me to make another investment because I know how everything fails. And so it's definitely the curse of knowledge, right? You can know too much, and sometimes having a bit of naivety is good. The way I
Mhm.
think about it is like, I would like to know all the reasons why companies failed, but I would not let that discourage me from trying again, precisely
Mhm.
for the reasons that you said. And you actually see this in YC's like investment philosophy too. Like YC is notorious for backing the same idea batch after batch after batch.
Mhm.
Right. Probably doesn't please the founders all too much that they're, backing them and also all of their competitors.
Yeah.
But I think inherently that whether it's explicit or not, I think the YC partners who are making these investment decisions, they know that just because an idea didn't work at one point in time doesn't mean that the same idea won't work again. And so that's why they continually back the companies seemingly doing the same things.
One of the numbers that goes around Silicon Valley is that, a large percentage of startups fail. I think it's like 80 or 90% plus of startups fail. To what extent can
And I
you
think that's after
actually,
they've raised funding, right? So that doesn't even include all the ones that never raised funding.
possibly.
Yeah, because they only have data on like the ones that are on Crunchbase and CB Insights.
So looking here, for instance, at the report you put together for FinTech, the active rate is actually a lot higher than I was expecting it to be. Like
Hmm.
76% of these startups are active. To what extent can we actually tell if they're active? And like that number seems high. Maybe if I look at the cohorts, it makes sense. Like most of them raised like, I think the median is like, okay, maybe like 2021, it was, to now is when the median age of them. Maybe that explains why they haven't failed. Maybe they have enough money for like 5, 6 years, but like still, it seems like a bit long. Like, can you accurately tell if a startup's over or not? Like, because like
Yeah.
maybe, you
So
know,
this is there are a few things at play here. One is we don't make that determination. We just go off whatever YC directory says. And so if
I
you go to
see.
yc.com/companies, for each company, it will tell you whether it's active or inactive. And I suspect similar to you, if you're a founder and you just shut down your company, you're probably not telling YC. You're not telling Gary Tan, hey, I just shut down my company. Like, switch us to inactive.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there are some delays there between like when you shut down a company and when the YC directory is updated. But I
I
do
mean,
like they have an
is it
API and
ever updated?
yeah, I mean that's why there are companies listed as inactive, right? And I checked
Mhm.
their API and it seems like they do like a batch update every month or so. So they probably get
Okay.
data from which company shut down. But like you said, like some companies might just not report it. And I've definitely found instances where it's like, is this company still around? Like their last tweet was like 12 months ago, right?
Yeah.
But it still says active on the YC directory. So yeah, some companies might be going through like pivot hell, right, where they still have the money from YC, they still haven't given up, but like the idea itself is pretty much dead.
Hmm.
Some companies maybe shut down but don't report it back to YC,
Yeah.
so we never get the resolution there. And then one thing you do have to realize is that there's a the distribution of YC companies is very like back weighted to like the recent years because they've increased the batch
You can
sizes
see
so
that on
much.
the fintech chart as well. I mean, although to be honest, fintech is back in 2026 where it was in 2015, whatever. But
Yeah.
but you can kind of see the exponential growth of
Yeah.
these
And so because YC
companies.
went from like 20, 30 companies a batch, probably in the early days, to now hundreds of companies a batch, just probability wise, more companies are going to be more recent.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, if they were founded in the last 3 years, they raised 500K from YC, I could see them like still plugging along and not like shutting down.
What is of the companies that are inactive? What is the median age? Like, how long does it take to get to inactive on average?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I don't have the answer to that. And
Because
and
I
yeah,
wonder if
there's no
that tells us
timestamp
a
on
lot
like
about
when
the.
a company's status switches too. So I don't know if we can
Oh,
even figure
well,
that
I
out.
guess if you guys are pinging the API all every month, then you might
Yeah, we
start
could over
collecting
time
that
build up. Yeah,
the timestamps. Cool.
but
I think it would be
that's a
cool
good question.
to run the agent to see like, oh, if like these are the ones that are inactive, go through the list and see if there's any other obvious candidates for inactive. Although
Yeah.
I appreciate you might not want to bring negative news to founders who haven't self-reported this.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm sure it can back into that just by how much funding they raised, right?
Yeah,
There's probably some assumed amount of like annual burn rate for a startup with like,
yeah.
let's say, you just have the two co-founders working on it. You're probably burning 500K a year, something like that.
Hmm.
And so you can just look at how much they raised and divide it by like, this is your runway of how many years more left you have. And obviously the more they raise, the longer they can drag it out for. I will say I always really respect companies that are like, that keep themselves very lean, and maybe they were started too early, but they kept themselves alive for long enough to actually hit their breakout moment, right?
Hmm.
So like Replit comes to mind. For like 10 years, Replit was just a coding platform for like high school kids. And it was like
Yeah,
not really that big of a deal until, Sonnet 4 came out. And now suddenly they shifted entirely to being an app builder. And that was when they went from, single digit million in revenue to like hundreds of millions, seemingly,
yeah,
over a number of months. Kalshi is another one. I think Kalshi was founded in like 2018. And I remember hearing about Kalshi as a company very early on, maybe when they were doing YC, and thinking similar to you about prediction markets, that like, okay, this is only going to be used for sports. And yeah, think about it. They had to wait until like 2024 was like breakout moment, right? When the
yeah.
regulatory regime changed, when people could bet on elections, like the political elections, and that changed everything for them. But they could have very easily given up in the like 6 years in between.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, lucky for them, they didn't. Now they're doing great. Although I do wonder sometimes you see people struggling along for a decade plus, and you just think to yourself, God, like the opportunity cost of all of this must be massive, right? These are people who often could be making significant salaries somewhere else, and you just think to yourself, gosh, like. And you also like sometimes you look at it and you're like, oh man, this idea is never gonna go anywhere. Like, why are
Yeah,
you spending
yeah,
so
yeah,
much time on this? Although that being said, often I've thought that and then it becomes a super successful thing. So, whatever that means.
yeah. I think so many founders are delusional, and then only based on the outcome, you decide whether they're the good kind of delusional or the bad kind of delusional, right?
Hmm.
If they end up building a unicorn company, you're like, oh, you're delusional in a good way.
Yeah,
Conversely, like, yeah, you might think like this, you should have given up 5 years ago.
yeah, yeah. All right. So obviously you put together this, it went viral on X. Congratulations for that. What are you actually building in your day to day? Are you working on some project that is vaguely related to this, or was this just like complete hobby, hack it over a weekend at a hackathon sort of situation?
Yeah, this was more of a hackathon slash side project
Hmm.
with some, light monetization built in to sustain itself and keep the flywheel going.
Yeah.
But I think it is a part of the larger theme I'm interested in, which
Hmm.
is people and developers and AI users' relationship to
Hmm.
tokens, to their
Hmm.
tokens, right? So I think Forbes recently published this deep dive into Cursor where they had the stat about how frontier labs like Anthropic and OpenAI are effectively subsidizing token usage at a ratio of something like 20 to 25 to 1 a ratio.
Hmm.
So if you pay $200 from Claude Code, they're probably spending, $4,000 or $5,000 worth of compute on that to serve that user. And yeah, why do I say this project is kind of related to that? Is a lot of people have caught on to this. They're now switched their mindset into like, this is a gold rush. What do I do with this surplus of tokens that might be a blip in history when we have this uh, this incredible like window of opportunity. And a lot of people that otherwise maybe wouldn't have been building um, bootstrap companies or vertical SaaS software, they're now getting into it, and they're looking for validated ideas that almost worked to build. Right. So they know I have a bunch of tokens. How do I like best deploy these? And so that's where startups.rip comes in. The other project I'm working on that's along these lines is called Stroud, STRAUDE.com.
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
stands for Strava for Claude Code. And so that came from just an observation that many of my friends in Silicon Valley, especially in the AI hackathon scene, we have this, someone coined it token anxiety, which is like if we're not outputting tokens, if our agents aren't constantly spinning, we think it's like wasted time, dead time, right? It's
Yeah.
almost like, yeah, it's almost comical in the way that like people think about their agents and token output. But based on this like phenomenon that's happening, I decided to build Strava for Claude Code. And so it
Hmm.
is a global leaderboard of how much token people are using. They can connect with their friends, see what their friends are doing, see what their friends are outputting. And yeah, it's like a social network on top of power users of AI. So that's the other project that I'm excited about and currently building.
Okay, Oscar, I want to ask you a question because I've been wondering this for a while. Like, I use Cloud Code every day. It's a huge chunk of what I do. I'm on the max plan, and I have hit limits before, but at the same time, I feel like I must be massively behind everyone else because, for instance, like the weekly limit, I've never hit it. Like I've hit the session limit. I've never
Yeah.
hit the weekly limit. Like, what am I doing wrong that, like, I seem to be super behind on what everyone else is. Are people just like, on it 20, like what are people doing that I'm not doing? Because like I find that if I split, like if I'm running like seven things at once, I always end up stuck with stuff that needs intervention anyway, right? Like you need to log into your whatever DNS provider. You need to sign up to this API. You need to do this. You need to do that. You need to review whatever the output is. So what am I missing here? Like, how are people generating so much in terms of token usage?
Yeah. So I just sent you the link to our leaderboard. This is a global leaderboard of Stroud
Yeah, I'm
users.
on it. I'm on it.
Yeah. And it's crazy, right? I mean, so this is not how much they pay. This is how many tokens they're
Yeah.
outputting multiplied by standard API pricing. So
Hmm.
they may very well be getting to this number just with a few max plans, right? That they switch between. So they're not actually like spending $3,000 a week on Claude Code, but that's like how much value you could proxy. You could say that they're getting out of Claude Code. Yeah, I think the big unlock of when you go from staying within the session limits to very quickly exceeding them is when you're running Claude Code overnight. So if you
Okay.
look at like the top 10 users on Strad, that's pretty much, I would suspect, like having talked to some of them, that's what they're doing is like they're running Claude Code when they're not at their computers. And to do that, you're right. Like the way these agents are built is like they're always asking you for things that you need to do. There's always things you need to unblock. And they figured out how to build a harness to unblock the agent without the user being present.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a whole subgenre of like long running agents or like long horizon task agents. And you've probably seen like Cursor came out with like a blog post about how they got their Cursor agents to build an entire browser
Hmm.
with minimal like human in the loop. And I think Anthropic had a similar blog post about how they built a C compiler. And so what they're doing is they're spending a lot of effort on getting the harness correct, like the agent harness correct, and giving it the proper permissions, the proper rules, proper tools up front, and then just letting the agent go. So I have friends that are running Claude Code like where each task is like 5 hours long.
Hmm.
And that's when you start hitting the weekly limits. And so a lot of them, they cycle between max plans. They have like, my work gives me 3 max plans. I myself have 2 personal max plans. And with these 5 the Cloud Code max plans, that's how they're able to hit these kind of numbers.
So what does that look like in practice? Like I say I want to build a product and just help me think of an example. Like there's it's very easy to think of these self-contained things where you can keep it running overnight, like build a browser, build a C compiler. These are things
Yeah.
we don't necessarily need to do things that need human intervention, like sign up to an API plan, do this, do that. Or do you just give him like a credit card and say, hey, here's a card, go for it. You sign up, you do whatever
Yeah.
you need. Here's my email. You have access to my inbox. Like give me like a few examples. Cause like if I'm thinking of the productive work that I do with it, like yeah, there's a few things where I could have it run overnight and produce a ton of stuff, but like I just don't know to what extent the end result would be something that is actually useful.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of them have the workflow where before they go to bed, they kick off a number of tasks. And then their routine is now, over their morning cup of coffee, they're reviewing the results. And maybe a lot of them are bad and they have to reject. But the role of the developer becomes someone who's like a reviewer rather than someone
Yeah.
who's like generating the feature. Yeah, in terms of some things that people are doing, like some college students are entirely replacing their college life with AI. Where if you're a college student, you have this like platform called Canvas, I think. It's just like a web platform you go on to like get assignments and submit assignments. So they have their agent essentially own that end to end, where every week on Monday, they go on, get all the assignments, do all the assignments, and then the agent uploads all the assignments on Friday. So
Hmm.
they basically replaced, the entire responsibilities of a college student with their AI agent. And then now they probably just go party, do other things.
Yeah.
In a professional context, every company has a big backlog, right? Things that we could do, but we're not getting around to. Well, now I think arguably you no longer need a backlog because if you have async agents running all the time, you can build every feature that's ever been requested and just, merge them into main if you think it's good. If you don't
Hmm.
think it's good, just leave it as is. Right. So now you don't no longer have like product requests. This a lot of what I do with long running agents is Shroud itself is open source. So people
Hmm.
submit GitHub issues and pull
Just
requests.
go through them.
Yeah. And I never look at them. I just tell my agent, like, hey, whenever there's a new PR coming in, see if it like fits within our roadmap of like roughly what we want to build. If so, like merge it into main. If not, like reject it. Right. So it's doing all of this like triaging. Another interesting project to look at is called Night Shift. It's on GitHub. It's also open source.
Hmm.
It's exactly what I described, where it's like there's all these like quality of life improvements you can make to your code base, like better documentation, or just factoring out code in ways that make it more modular. That like you would never prioritize. Like it would always be very low on the list of priorities that you have for your product. But Night Shift basically takes your excess usage and directs it towards those types of tasks.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like there's still a ton of stuff I need to get more clued up on. I guess I can look into that and
Yeah.
figure that
And I
out.
think that would be one of the big reasons why people join Stroud is they want to learn what other people are doing. Right.
Hmm.
So right now I'm kind of learning this stuff. Actually, I think the best source has been like the AI hackathon scene in San Francisco.
Hmm.
Because you go and you see like hackathons have basically it's a solved problem now. Because what I'm seeing what some people do, so hackathons usually happen over like the course of a day, like 9 a.m. to 9
Yeah.
p.m. I'm seeing people like arrive at noon, like kick off their agent, go to lunch, go home, and then they come back at like 6 p.m. to present their project. And that's like
Yeah.
all that's all that they've done, and they do really well at these hackathons. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I find the power users at hackathons. Sometimes you see what people are doing on X. Reddit is another good one. So when I launched both of these projects, I I did a post in r/vibe coding, and
Hmm.
those types of subreddits, you can start to see like what the top 1% power users are doing. But over time, I would love to grow Stroud into a community where people are actually like sharing everything that they're doing with agents. That would be a reason. First, it's just like bragging rights, right? Like, hey, look how many millions of tokens I burned this week. It's like a weird flex almost. But over time, I think there could be more like educational and informational like benefit from like looking at this feed.
Do people in Stroud actually log what the tokens went on? Do you have any data on that?
No, so it's I think this is something that like you have to earn trust over time. And
Hmm.
so at the very beginning, like when we're still in the very beginning, this project is like less than a month old. We just look at the local forget the name of the file, but in Cloud Code or in Codex, there's like a usage file essentially. It's in this format called JSON-L.
Mm,
Um and yeah, it's just literally like input tokens, output tokens, cache tokens. Like it's a very
mm,
simple file. And so that's all we have visibility into, because I know as soon as we start like, asking for permission to like session data, that becomes very sensitive,
of
especially if
course.
people are doing stuff for work, right? Like for side projects, it probably doesn't matter as much, but if you're
Yeah,
running Cloud Code for your job, like that becomes a really big like potential problem. So we've not asked for anything about the session, but right now it's like think of like posting a run or a ride
yeah,
that you did on Strava. Like you might write a
yeah,
few sentences about what you saw, like,
yeah,
what music you listened to. So that's like the level of fidelity and level of like commentary we have so far. But over time, yeah, it would be really cool to get a better sense of like what are the power users doing that the rest of us can learn from.
yeah. No, I'm super interested in this because I'm really into sort of like I come from a data background and I'm super into like personalized sort of data. I'm actually I'm actually building on top of the Strava API to generate nice visuals that you could otherwise not generate. But for myself personally, one of the things I do is I have Cloud Code go through a variety of data sources every month to help me understand what I spent my time doing and what are the things I achieved. One of the things it does
Mm.
is it looks at my screen time, so I know exactly how much time I spent looking at the Cloud Code iOS app. But also, it looks at its own logs and it tells you like, okay, like how many sessions did I spend in what projects, how many messages, etc., how many tool calls. So I'd be
Wow,
super
cool.
curious to see how that compares to. It doesn't have tokens though. I wonder if I can get it to add it in there.
Yeah, you can totally get it. So we use a package called CC Usage. You can look this
Hmm.
up. It has like 11K stars on GitHub, because there's all these like edge cases you run into when you try to calculate like token spend yourself. And so I didn't want to have to deal with that. So I just like outsourced it to this like open source package called CC Usage. It's pretty popular. I mean, now it's like kind of built into Claude. Like I think there's a command you can run in Claude that just like tells you what is the equivalence API spent that you did based on your usage. But CC Usage is like the open source version of that. So we rely on that. But that's very cool. So you essentially want like a personal command center, like everything that you're doing, like your
I have I
productivity,
have
like
I have a monthly
recapped.
report that measures everything from my weight to my screen time to
Okay.
how many kilometers I ran, to how much time I
Amazing.
spent in the gym, to my sleep scores, heart rate, what projects I worked on, revenue, expenditure, the
Yeah,
whole
we got to
thing.
get you on Shroud because you're the ideal user for this. Because I posted on Reddit and Hacker News for this project, and I kind of got dunked on. People were like, "Who in the right mind, would care about like token count?" And then yeah, and then all these people that are like, of the quantified self movement. I personally am not. I don't track everything, but I do track some KPIs in my life. Like steps taken, things like that. Very very simple things, and it feels good to like know that number and know the trend over time.
Yeah.
And so you're like the extreme version of that. I'm getting. That's the
Yeah,
sense I'm
so
getting.
I also think this is going to come to everyone because it used to be a pain to do this, but like just last week I got all of my, I've lived in various different countries. I have dozens of bank accounts everywhere, like portfolios all over the place. Huge mess. I've never had a single overview of how much I spending, how much I income revenue I receive, where my assets are, what are they in, etc. Because it's just, UK pension, US pension, UK bank accounts, US bank accounts, etc. And I think these data moats are precisely because of AI, they're increasingly going away. Aggregate all of these, so you can quantify yourself in a way that you just couldn't before.
Yeah, yeah. Like, but back when, I think the number of people that do something like this is proportional to like how tedious that task is.
Exactly, exactly,
Right. So if it's
exactly.
like super tedious, yeah, you maybe get 1% of the population doing it. And these are like the
Yeah.
biohackers, the quantified self people. But now if it's like, as easy as, firing off a prompt to Claude, then suddenly that, the addressable market might increase tenfold.
Super easy. Yeah, super easy. All right. I don't want to keep you for too long. Thank you so much for your time. This has been super interesting. Great lesson on what startups work, what startups might work in the future, and what startups have definitely not worked in the past.
For sure.